Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
Welcome to Flat Earth Debate. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you're new to this channel, or you've not done so already, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support this channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they're live, and there's also a PayPal link in the info box below the video once it's rendered. But most importantly, if you would like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the shape of the Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel. So please share the show. And one last time, if you're new to this channel or you've not done so already, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. Now we are joined by Chocolate Saying, Arwin and Anthony Riley. Good to have you all.
Good afternoon.
Yep, morning, good morning.
Morning. Shout out to the Mind of God for a very early super chat, and Oakley for Prime Minister. No, I don't think so. Right, any signs of curvature, gentlemen?
Nope.
Any signs of axial rotation?
No.
Of the Earth-based variety?
Nope.
Negative.
Any proof of gravity?
Nope.
Any evidence of gas pressure without a container?
Definitely not.
Any proof for a measured distance to the sun?
Nope.
What distance?
No.
There is no distance to the sun.
That'd be a no then.
Nope.
Yep.
Any evidence of a self-perpetuating molten iron core at the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth?
None.
No? Anybody? Anybody for anybody?
No, definitely not.
No molten iron core. What a shock. What about R itself? Any evidence of Earth radius?
Nope.
Round.
Just saying it's round is just an assertion of one's religious belief. Oh. Shout out to legendary super looming perspective Enigma Hyena for the super chat. Much obliged. Technically, that's the second super chat he's put on this show, because when the show ends, so when yesterday's show, or one of the 4 shows that we did because of technical issues, when the show ended, he stayed in the chat for about, I don't know, at least an hour, it's probably even longer, with George, and just to get a laugh out of the other people who were in the chat with him, he sent a £2 donation saying he doesn't know what century it is. He thinks it's 1918.
He doesn't know the Coriolis force either, but argues that he does.
Well, it's become the new mascot, you know.
So George was in the chat for an hour after the show ended.
Wow.
I came back to the chat because I was publishing various videos on my backup channel. So check out the backup channel if you don't know already. We continue to record for the entire stream, and then I'll split it up after the show and put it into sections with the in-between bits on my backup channel, which is just Nathan space Oakley. Space being a gap, not space as in outer space, for any pedantic idiot in the chat comments. Anyway, so go and check out Nathan Oakley channel if you want to see those in-betweeny bits. Bit of an extra, just a added bonus. But yeah, I forgot my point now. What the hell was I telling you all this for?
Super looming.
Oh yeah, super looming.
Asked, was George in the chat for an hour after the show? I mean, this guy
it certainly seems that way.
during
Like I
the
say,
whole chat.
I wasn't paying attention. People often stay in the chat for several hours after the show ends. And in that case, it was George and legendary super looming non-standard refraction hyena, whatever it's called, legendary super looming perspective enigma hyena. Him and a few other people. I think it was MIDI HC, and I can't remember the other one who was in there, but they were just chatting away. And like I say, just to get a laugh, he put a super chat in after the show had ended. But that attributes itself to this show, so technically that's the second super chat from, let's say his name again, legendary super looming perspective enigma hyena.
Yeah, shout out to Hyena. Hyena's awesome. He made a pretty dope video for me the other day. He's
What,
pretty.
the one
He's
about
pretty.
me? Thanks.
No, he
No,
made
not
he
the
made a
one
nice
about
video.
you.
Yeah,
I saw you on the thumbnail.
What about me?
What was the one
Well-
about you? I did see you on the thumbnail. I haven't actually had a chance to watch the one he made about you. I assume it's complimentary, Arwin.
No, it was really annoying.
What does he say about you?
Really, it wasn't
Well,
complimentary.
it's just a bunch of fantasy characters with my face on it, like from computer games and all kinds of shit, with really crappy music over it.
Cool, like mine
So,
with Neo.
no, it
Oh, it's
sucked.
Neo. It was really cool. Were you like that? Yeah, like a super cool dude, like Neo, like me.
I don't know.
Yeah. That's
He's
what he
being
did,
a dick to
basically.
me all the time.
I think he was just joking with you, Arwen. No, I
Yeah.
don't know.
Okay.
He's great though. He's got pretty good editing skills with videos, so he makes funny freaking memes and videos. So yeah, shout out to Hyena. You're looking out on the video, man.
Nathan, can I catch up with a couple of outstanding issues that I want to remind people that are outstanding and are incredibly damning to these ballers, particularly the three liars?
Sure. Do you need me to screen share you?
Yes, because I need the sound to pass through.
That'll come through anyway. But do you need visual representations on stuff like that?
Yeah, go on. You may as well, because otherwise
Okay.
it's...
No problem.
So we have... let's get rid of that. Where to start first? Should I do Sean Hufford or should I do Geo's Hangout first? We'll do Geo's Hangout because it's more generic. And it's the scientific method that they're talking about. And it's the guy that was in yesterday, Toy Story. When I saw this coming up on Geo's Hangout, I was going to listen to it, but I saw how many people he had on the panel, and I saw who was on the panel, and I just thought, I'm not listening to that. That's just going to be a mess. And to be fair to Geo, and I don't really want to do this, but it is due. He kicked his own Hangout member, the Rumpus, for rumpusing the Hangout. And in doing so, it saved the Hangout from being a mess. There was actually a conversation, which is, well, that's what needs to happen. So again, it reasserts the point that Rumpus is just being an idiot. But anyway, the point is they're talking about the scientific method, Nathan. So you need to prick your ears up and listen to what's being said. But there's a few points that I've highlighted in this clip, mainly the bits that I've highlighted that are above, and then this last part down here. Because Rumpus doesn't understand the scientific method, and if he does understand it, he's deliberately obfuscating it to sound confusing. And it's not confusing, it's not difficult, but he's making it sound difficult to try and make him sound like he's the one with all the cards. And I don't agree with this. I think this is nonsense. The scientific method is straightforward, and it is not difficult to understand. But listen to how this conversation goes. Now, the context of this conversation is they're talking about the Etvos effect. And they're at the point in the conversation where a graph is presented by GeoStreamer, and Toy Story says, well, what is the graph? And basically the question that he asks is, on what data is this graph based? And the answer that Geo gives is, well, it's not based on data, it's based on the model. And he's basically about to point that out, that this is incredibly weakened by the fact that it's a model. It's not actual real world raw data. This is based on their model. And he's about to point that out. But because Rumpus realizes the strength of the point that is just about to be made, it's like being the last defender when the ball gets played and you realize that you've just made a mistake and you now have to foul that player and get sent off because he's just about to score a goal. This is the reason why Rumpus does what he does, because he realizes that he's just about to destroy the whole argument. So I've highlighted the two parts here at the beginning that are basically Geo's responses. And he's admitting that it's based on the model. It's not based on the maths. So we're at the point where he's asking, what is this based on? What is this graph that you see on screen based on? And listen to how it goes. It's
Sorry,
brilliant.
it is based on the maths.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, did I misspeak then?
You said it isn't, but it is. But that's fine.
Yeah, sorry. It's based on the maths, but it's not based on the data or any data. So check this.
This graph here, that's actually a parabola. Do you see that?
Yes, I see that.
Okay,
nice
and
curve
you
there.
see that the minimum is here. And now the distance between this point over here minus...
Oh, Gio, where'd this data come from before we go on?
no idea. I think this one is calculated.
I mean, what's the source of the data?
This is directly from a geometry program, I guess.
I mean, but who measured this?
This is not measured. This is calculated.
Oh, so it's not measured in reality. It's just calculated with mathematics.
Yeah,
Is that
I mean,
what you're saying?
this is the mathematical curve that we are expecting.
Oh, mathematics.
So I'll just stop it there. He says this is the mathematical curve that we are expecting, right? This is not empirical in any way, shape, or form. But Toy Story realizes this, and he's just about to say something. And listen to how Rumpus destroys it, right? This is the foul, the intentional
Sorry, just
foul.
before you
that
do,
Gates-
I'm really sorry. He's not called
What?
Toy Story. He's called Brandon Toy.
Okay, well, he's got the hangout's called Toy Story, so I just assumed his handle was So apologies, Brandon Toy.
Sorry, I just had to correct it just so people don't start calling the guy Toy Story.
Okay, so Brandon Toy. So listen to the intentional foul that Rumpus makes because he realizes that he's about to get destroyed. This point that he's about to make is about to knock the argument into the bin.
Okay. Gotcha.
Okay, so again, I told you again those when you asked me what the speed in kilometers per second was, the minus 465.
I was just wondering where this data came from. I thought it was real world data.
It
I
has
Yeah,
thought
wait.
it
been
was just
experiments.
Mathematicians.
There have been experiments on it.
Shut
It's
up,
been
Ron.
verified. Shut up, you twat. Shut up, you wanker. You don't understand anything,
Okay.
do you?
I'm sorry,
No,
Rumpus. I have to kick you.
No.
So Geo kicks him, right, which is the right thing to do because he was Rumpus in his own hangout. But Brandon Toy realizes that this point is based on maths. It's not based on empiricism, right, which is the whole point of the scientific method. But they're presenting a graph to make the point about the Eötvös effect. And I want to know where the evidence is that supports the Eötvös effect anyway. But they're presenting a graph as evidence, which is evidence only of what they would expect to see on the model. So Rumpus realizes that they're about to get destroyed, and he has to basically take one for the team. So he fouls this guy and then gets sent off for doing so, and rightly so as well. So that was the first point. So massive shout out there to Brandon Toy for getting that because that is
Can I add-
incredibly.
Can I add one ancillary point? I'm not 100% that GeoStreamer realised that it was actually a necessary adage for Rumpus to do that. Like you say,
Yeah, I agree.
He didn't appreciate that was the obfuscation that was needed to work around the demolition that was being undertaken by Brandon.
Yeah, I totally agree. Gio doesn't realise that Rumpus has to commit the foul because the guy's clean through on goal. He's realised that this is pseudoscience. This is based on maths. It's not based on empiricism. There's no evidence here. This is based on what they would expect, and he admitted it himself. So he was about to point that out. Rumpus realised, fouled him, and then Gio sent him off. So I feel a little bit sorry for Rumpus there, but that's the politics that was going on at the moment. Rumpus realised and took one for the team. Now, anyway, this is where they start talking about the scientific method, Nathan, and you get attacked here a little bit. So they're setting the scene with what's being said, and I think it's epistemology for truth that's talking, and he's setting the background to it. So this first couple of clips is descriptive.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that you have heard of Quantum Eraser and a couple other people and their analysis of the scientific method, correct?
I've heard of quantum eraser. I'm
Okay.
familiar with the
Right.
scientific method, and I do not agree 100% with everything that anyone on the internet says. Just be aware. Go ahead, though.
No, but it's the question. So in the scientific process, this is where I will agree with Quantum Eraser in that saying that the assumed cause is one of the variables that you are actually testing for.
So there's nothing contentious with that. He starts off by agreeing with Quantum Eraser that the assumed cause is what you're looking for, right? So we're all right at this point. Now listen to this.
I'm just saying the correct scientific terminology is hypothesis.
So they're talking about the hypothesis and what the hypothesis is. Nate, do you want to tell everybody what the hypothesis is?
Sure, it's your establishment of what you're going to go forward to actually experiment and validate. So it establishes your presumed cause in a cause and effect relationship. It establishes your independent variable, which at this stage, in hypothesis stage, is your presumed cause. And you already have this because it would be step one, the effect, which is your observed phenomena, the dependent variable. So the hypothesis establishes your independent and dependent variable and the relationship between the two of them. It also establishes your presumed cause, because at this point you haven't experimented, you haven't validated your cause is a cause. It also, just to add one more thing, gives you a null, the no effect, i.e. if you are to use, let's say you're trying to establish the cause of water boiling, and you say that air movement causes it, and you introduce air movement as your independent variable, and it causes no effect. Well, that would be in your hypothesis, i.e. you will anticipate a null result. That would be your null hypothesis. So that is essentially the antithesis of what you will presume your cause will do. So your cause is that it will cause the effect, i.e. the observed phenomena, and the null is that it won't. Pretty simple.
Now, what they're talking about here is when you said the hypothesis is your presumed cause, right? He focuses on the word presumed rather than the word cause. So what he's trying to do is point out that presumptions are okay in the scientific method, rather than pointing out that it's the presumed cause being the operative word, not the presumed bit, but that he's trying to move the focus away from the cause into the presumptions are okay bit. So listen to what else he says.
Before you do play it, then I'll reiterate this, that because you have a presumed cause, that's why you have both an alternative and a null hypothesis, so that you have an answer for both when you vary your independent variable. When you manipulate it, if you get no effect, you confirm the null. If you get the result that you were anticipating and predicted in your hypothesis, that your presumed cause is the cause of the effect, then you validate your hypothesis. The null is then obviously irrelevant. But one section or other of that hypothesis will get confirmed at the end of systematic experimentation on your alternative hypothesis.
So let's listen to what he says now, and then we'll just dissect it at the end of this clip.
Yes, right? but in lay terms, understanding it is still an assumed cause. It is still an assumption. So you are starting with, well, I think it's this. Let me test that.
Sure.
What's the problem?
So he asks, what's the problem? But notice how he's focusing on the assumption, right? He's trying to make out that the assumption is okay, but he's completely ignoring the word cause, which is the point. You're supposed to be establishing the cause and the effect relationship. So that's what you're focusing on, the cause. But he's focusing on the presumption and saying that presuppositions are okay in the scientific method. Well, technically, yes. However, it's moot. It's not even moot. It's ancillary. It's secondary. The point that you should be focusing on at this point is the word cause, not the word presumed effect. It's the wrong place to be focusing on. But anyway.
Hold on, play it again. I don't think he said presumed effect. Can you just play it one more time?
Yeah, he did. Listen to what he says.
I'm just saying the correct scientific terminology is hypothesis.
Yes, right? but in lay terms, understanding it is still an assumed cause. It is still an assumption. So you are starting with, well, I think it's this. Let me test that.
Sure.
What's the problem?
What's wrong with that?
So, no, he's right. But he's focusing his word on the word assumption, the assumed cause, right?
I assume this will make sense in a moment, so fine.
Okay. But you should be focusing on the word cause at this point. But anyway, listen to the next bit, right? This is where you get involved in it, because Rumpus speaks really fast, and I can't understand what he actually says. So perhaps you'll catch it, and because I don't get it. But what he says is that Nathan doesn't understand part of it, and then he clarifies it. And let's just rip Rumpus a new one, because this is just not right.
Science construct models. Yes, I understand that.
Oh, sorry. So they're talking about the importance of having a scientific model, and Brandon Toy is saying that you don't need a scientific model to have a scientific experiment. So they're arguing about the validity of whether or not there's a scientific model needed in an experiment, and obviously the answer is no, there's not. You don't need a scientific model because you're testing one thing.
Hold on, scientific model. Now, if there were to be such a thing, I mean, I think they would probably call it a scientific theory, yeah? Using their terminology, someone else did this in the comments, this is probably why. Scientific model, as far as I'm concerned, is nonsense. You can have a scientific model, but it must be entirely based on systematic experimentation. Yeah, that's what you would have if it was to be called a scientific model.
Travis, you gotta mute, brother.
Did you want to add something, Travis?
No.
Oh, he's muted.
Science construct models. Yes, I understand that. But why do I need a model to conduct scientific experiments?
Because you need to have something to formulate your hypothesis from.
Your hypothesis is a model, effectively.
Is your hypothesis a model, Nathan?
No, your model. There's no modelling involved. You're establishing your independent and dependent variable, your cause and your effect. That's it. There's no model.
So, Rumpus, you are not correct. Your hypothesis is not a model. It's a prediction of the cause and the effect relationship between two things. That's it.
Your
Well,
hypothesis is you're saying that this is my prediction. Thank you. Go ahead. You're saying the same thing I am.
Yeah, your hypothesis is a prediction based on a model.
Is your hypothesis a prediction based on your model?
No. Not at all.
Do you want to say it again?
Your hypothesis establishes the cause, independent variable, and the effect, dependent variable. And whether or not, the prediction, your presumed cause is actually the cause or not. There's no modelling involved.
So you have to ask the question that these academics that are protagonists on the Boleth side, why are they pushing this? What's going on? So I'll play it again so that you can contrast with what Nathan said. The cause is the hypothesis is the cause and effect relationship. It establishes the dependent and the independent variable. But listen to what they say.
Yeah, your hypothesis is a prediction based on a model.
That's just not true. Now this is the bit where you get mentioned, Nathan.
Yeah.
No, your hypothesis is a prediction based on the relationship between a independent and dependent variables.
So he got that verbatim perfect, did he not?
Yeah, Brandon's absolutely spot on. They are incorrect.
Correct. So now listen to what Rumpus says. So listen carefully. He says it really quick, and I can't quite make out what he says.
No. Hold on. You've got confused. The hypothesis is something you propose, and the experiment in which you then test one of the variables.
So let's just run that back again.
One of the variables.
No.
Well, yeah, that's the other bit.
Hold on. You've got confused. The hypothesis is something you propose, and the experiment in which you then test one of the variables.
He said the hypothesis is something you propose. The hypothesis is something you propose? No. The hypothesis is your scientific prediction. It establishes your presumed cause in a cause and effect relationship, Rumpus. Are you thick? Do you genuinely not understand the scientific method?
So this is where he goes on to say that Nathan doesn't understand this. And he speaks really fast here, so I might have to play it twice so you catch it. But listen to what he says.
So, for instance, in the case of gravity, you have three variables, three causes in effect that cause the force between two masses and the distance between them. You've got three things you can play with. You then create an experiment to test that hypothesis, which has three causes in it, and you then test each one of those separately to isolate them. So you then have.
Why do I need a model for that, Rumpus?
Well, your model is that. Well, as Micah was saying, you have the hypothesis of consequence of your model. Your model is that there are these.
That's not true. Your hypothesis is not a consequence of your model.
Forces attract, and the formula for the attracting masses is you then present a formula and say, this in my hypothesis, in my model, masses attract one another, and here's the formula presented in quantified manner that represents the hypothesis, this equation.
Can a formula represent a hypothesis, a valid scientific?
He's got formula, hypothesis, and model. Let's get it straight, Rumpus, you complete and utter retard. A hypothesis is a scientific prediction. It establishes the cause and effect relationship, which you will presume a single independent variable, and then through systematic experimentation, validate or invalidate your independent variable, 1, not 3, as the cause of the effect. If you establish that your single, sole, independent variable is the cause, then it's the cause. There's no further variables to do anything with. If, on the other hand, your single, independent variable is not the cause, you confirm the null hypothesis. Therefore, it is not the cause. Not a variable that you hold in lieu of the next two variables that you introduce, you absolute retard. Independent means independent.
Now can I conduct 3 experiments, or however many you like, to check all the 3 components of that formula? And in the case of the gravitational one, you've got three things you can play with: the 2 masses and
you want to just stop
the
it
distance
there?
Between them.
So he's stopped talking about hypothesis, and now he's talking about confirming a mathematical formula. So he's just completely discounted hypothesis, the scientific prediction that he is supposed to be talking about and moved on to validating his formula with his 3 variables. No, Rumpus. That's not an independent variable situation now, is it? That's 3 variables. Now, if you were to use one of them and put it into an experiment, then you'd have 1 independent variable. Now, through systematic experimentation, if you confirm that was your cause, then you'd have your cause. Nothing else to do from there. If, on the other hand, it's not your cause, then it's not your cause. Not part of the next 2 variables that you introduce in your formula, because we're not dealing with mathematics, we're dealing with science. And in science, you have hypothesis. You have scientific predictions that establish your independent variable, the presumed cause, and your dependent variable, the effect. That is it. No formula, no model, no multiple independent variables. It's a contradiction in terms.
Correct. That was the point that I wanted to emphasize, that he's got a formula in his hypothesis, and that's not part of a valid scientific hypothesis. It's a cause and an effect. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less.
So you then have 3. You could have 3 experiments testing each one of the separate with its change of the mass, each one of the 2 masses, and the distance between them. So then you would have just 1 independent variable. The thing that Nathan gets all confused about is he doesn't understand between the presenting of the hypothesis and then the experiments in which you test each of the components, with which your hypothesis is usually some multiple causes that come together, and it's the scenario of them coming together that causes an effect.
Multiple causes? You have an independent variable, the presumed cause of the effect. Not multiple independent variables. It's a contradiction in terms. Does this guy not even understand English?
No, what he's trying to do is present to GeoStreamer's audience that you sound confused. But to be honest, if you listen to the way he presents this, right, it's either he's babbling because he's lying, or he's babbling so that you can't actually make out what he says. But then he adds a little bit to it at the end, which sounds credible. But the bit in the main meat of the reason why Nathan's confused, I can't actually understand what he's saying. So let's hear for why he says that Nathan's confused. And if anybody can understand his gibberish, someone please translate it so that we understand what the point that Nathan's missing is.
I'm trying to. If I can get a chance to speak at any point, because rambling on, pretty much.
So then you would have just 1 independent variable. The thing that Nathan gets all confused about is he doesn't understand between the presenting of the hypothesis and then the experiments in which you test each of the components, with which your hypothesis is usually some multiple causes that come together, and it's the scenario of them coming together that causes an effect. It's the scenario of them.
So, I mean, multiple causes, the scenario of them coming together is what causes the effect. Have you ever said that, Nathan, to be confused in the first place?
No. No.
I'm lost for words. The guy is a retard. He's saying that's how you have 1, and then he goes on to explain how you have more than 1. Literally double speaking in the same bloody breath.
We had this discussion before, Nathan. In a singular experiment, there's only 1 cause for that experiment. That's no reason to just stop. Like, oh, we have a cause from this experiment, so that can be the only cause. No, it's not true. That's why you have controlled variables. So you.
What the bloody hell are you babbling about, Arwin? Once you have a cause...
I'm not babbling.
Yeah, you are. You've just said once you establish the cause, there's no need to just stop there. Let's establish the other causes. Are you an idiot?
No.
Well, hang on.
That's called being thorough.
Not being thorough. Once you scientifically validate a cause, you've got a cause. End of story.
No, not end of story.
Yes,
hang on.
End of story. That's the point of performing experiments, to establish whether or not your presumed cause is the cause. If you establish that it's the cause, Arwin.
Yeah, well, then you only have 1 singular proof.
That's right. 1 cause of the effect. That's right, Arwin. If you have multiple causes, then it sits outside of science.
That's ridiculous.
No, really? Then you don't understand science, Arwin. It's as simple as that.
I do understand science.
No, you don't.
Stop. Just wait. Let me. I'm going to come to that on my next clip. But listen to what he says. We never talk about multiple causes. Do we all agree that that's never been discussed?
It's being discussed right now by Arwin.
Singular experiment.
Arwin thinks you establish the cause, but that's not good enough. You need more causes.
Yeah,
right, but we've
that's
never
what the
spoke about
controlled
multiple
variables are
causes,
for.
correct? Guys, we've never spoke about multiple causes, correct?
Controlled variables have no effect whatsoever.
In
So-
a singular experiment.
Right, so if they have no effect, Arwin, then they're definitely not the cause.
Yeah,
In
he's right.
that
Arwin, just for a
specific
minute.
one experiment, yes. That's
Right.
why they're controlled variables.
Let me just
and not
explain it to you, Arwin.
independent
In an
variables.
experiment, you've got two sides to your hypothesis. One side says, you've won, you've done it, you've correctly predicted what the cause was. The other says, you're a dumbass, you got it wrong, you need to keep doing experiments till you find out what it is. You either confirm it or you don't. If you confirm it, you're saying you haven't really confirmed it because there's other causes. That is ridiculous.
No, it's
Right,
not.
just
And
stop
I've
a
given
sec.
you examples of how that works.
Gents, stop. Let me move this forward by just hold your thoughts for a minute because we can address them. I'm going to state that we've never talked about multiple causes at all, right? Even though there's a conversation right now, but I'm going to address that in a sec. I'll come back to it. But
No, we talked
his
about
point
this
at this
before.
point, listen,
On
Rumpus's
the air,
point.
I had a hangout.
Arwin,
here
please, just
about
shush.
it.
Listen to what Rumpus is saying about Nathan being confused. He says that Nathan's confused about a multiple cause experiment, which we never, ever, ever talk about until this conversation right now. So listen to what he says. He says Nathan's confused about multiple causes, okay?
So then you would have just one independent variable. The thing that Nathan gets all confused about is he doesn't understand between the presenting of the hypothesis and then the experiments in which you test each of the components, with which your hypothesis is usually some multiple causes that come together, and it's the scenario of them coming together that causes an effect. It's the scenario of them.
Right, that's never been said apart from this conversation right now. But what Rumpus is actually referring to is the complex hypothesis, which we never discuss. However, there is something called a complex hypothesis, which does have two or more independent variables and two or more independent dependent variables. But the problem is you lose the value of, or the strength of it being the cause, and you end up with a correlation. Now, that is not scientific proof of causation. That is a correlation, a mathematical correlation, and you don't have causation there. So it does fall outside true science. So this is what he's aiming at, but we never talk about this. So why Rumpus is saying that Nathan's confused about this, it's based on nothing. Rumpus is literally citing something that has never been discussed on a hangout, ever. But he is right to say that there is something called a complex hypothesis, but you don't get the scientific cause. So you lose the scientific cause in favor of a correlation, which is not a cause. There is a correlation and there is a cause, and the two are different. One of them is science, one of them is not. One of them is a correlation, which is mathematic. It's not based in science. It's based in the relationship between two or more independent variables, as it says on screen. So, but he's citing Nathan's getting confused about something that's never, ever, ever, ever on any of the hangouts anywhere been discussed. So why would he say it? I don't know why he would say that. It's not based on fact, but he has said it. So we'll clear it up. We're not talking about complex hypothesis, Rumpus. We're talking about science. We're talking about the independent variable causing an effect with the dependent variable. That's it. Nathan, do you want to say something?
No, not at all.
Arwin, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I do. What if you have an experiment and somebody else does pretty much the same experiment but uses another independent variable?
Then they would
And
get a
they
null
both
result.
prove to be the cause of the same observed phenomena.
Then they
What
have
do you
the
do then?
cause.
If they're
Then
two different types of independent variable and they both prove the cause in both experiments,
show me an example
What
of
do you-
that happening, Arwin.
what do you do?
Show me an example.
Oh, I did. I
No,
did
you've
before.
just described a scenario. You haven't shown me an example.
I'd have to
think
get a car.
the answer-
because
No,
remember
the answer to
the
your
acceleration rate versus the
Sorry,
mass
not
of an object.
formulate a new experiment based on a non-hypothesis. So, have you got an example of this where somebody found the cause and of effect through systematic experimentation and adherence to the scientific method, and then later someone came along and went, actually no, this causes the effect, and you and I both have the cause. Show me an
Yeah.
example of that happening.
Oh God, I have to go into historical details.
Sorry, my
God,
question is, do you have an example?
I'll bet you money
My
that
question,
happened.
Arwin, I'll repeat. Do you have an example of that?
No.
Right. I'll just discount what you've said entirely then, until you do.
That's up to you. If
No, it's
you're
not up to me.
gonna
You've
ignore
not
everything, that's
cited
fine.
any evidence.
No, we'll get evidence.
Yeah. Something to back your assertion?
Right.
Yeah, right.
So let's
Well,
move
my
on.
example,
I can't remember
you know what?
the point.
I am gonna do these things, and I'm gonna shove it in your face.
Great. I look forward to it. Till then,
Yeah,
I'll
right.
completely ignore and
If you're
discount
still
every
around
single
on
word of
YouTube
it
by then,
and take this
I will.
as just hot air.
That's
Alwyn,
fine,
apply it
Nathan.
to gravity. Shut up, Alan B. Right, so let me move forward. I can't remember what this clip's about, but let me play it and I'll remind myself of it.
If you had, for instance, if you just had one mass, or you had an infinite distance, there was no distance between them, there would be no effect. So it's not.
I thought we.
Hold on, let me.
I thought.
Give me five.
Oh yeah.
Give me 5 more seconds. 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 And so you have your 3 things, and if you didn't have any one of those components, you would not get an effect. You mustn't get confused between the hypothesis presenting the formula and the separate experiments you do to identify independent variables. Carry on.
Nothing that you just.
Was that not just word salad, Nathan?
Yeah, just total word salad.
That was utter obfuscation. He's deliberately trying to make this sound complicated because that didn't make sense. Now, I've listened to that numerous times, and what he's talking about there is so muddying of waters that are really clear. You establish your cause and your effect. That's it. But he's trying to make it out as though it's something it's not. And the only reason why I can think he's trying to do that is to try and claim the one-upmanship card over his opponent, in this case, Brandon Toy. But Brandon's bang on the money. Rumpus is not liking it, and he's losing his temper. That's why he's saying, 5 more seconds, because he's rattled. Brandon's getting this right. Rumpus is getting this wrong. Anyway, I think we're done here.
Said has anything to do with a wholly formed model. Fine, you have 3 different experiments that independently look at the relationships between dependent and independent variables. Fine, they may have interchanges between them. That has nothing to do with the requirement of a model before you can conduct a scientific experiment.
No, Mike, let me try this.
So basically, they're arguing that you need to have a model, and at that point, we can rattle that off. But basically, it appears that Rumpus either doesn't know about the scientific method or is deliberately trying to make it confusing so that normal people like me and you get confused by it. But the guy seems to be pulling fast ones, and I don't think that this is credible. I think the guy needs to have some basic schooling in scientific method, and I'd encourage him to attend Quantum Erasers Hangout on Tuesday evening, because Quantum Eraser is going to go through it. And I'm gonna tell John to aim this at the Rumpus, because he doesn't seem to understand it at all. Now what I want to do is present a catch-up for the Sean Hufford argument, which is, of course, GeoStreber and I had a hangout. In the hangout, I heard GeoStreber having a conversation with Soundly in the background, and this is what I recorded.
Wait, let me check it. Where was it? Further down, right?
Yeah, go back to that definition he cites too.
So GeoStreber asks Soundly, where is it? Further down, right? And Soundly responds and says, yeah, go back to that definition he cites too. Now, what then happened is I said that this was being recorded and this was a foul. And basically, Sean Hufford then, my assertion is that them two are having a conversation. Sean's had a hangout and said that it's actually being played through my microphone. Now, this is an example of Sean claiming to be audio guy in his hangout, claiming that there's something here. Now, I'm going to say, when I look at this, and he does this throughout his hangout, I'm going to say that there is nothing here whatsoever. And Sean is asserting his prowess and trying to make people think that there's something there when there isn't. It's a technique known as bamboozling. Basically, look here, can you see this? Can you see this? Can you see this? And we're all sat there thinking there's nothing there. So Sean is literally trying to tell people in his hangout that there is something here for us to consider. And I'll tell you now, there is absolutely nothing. So listen to what he says in his analysis.
Listen, everybody.
No, I'm just trying to identify what the meaning of the word angular size is.
Yes, and
you can hear right there that some audio that's not Anthony cuts off as soon as Geo starts to talk.
Identify what the meaning of the word angular size is.
Yes, and I already corrected you.
Anthony is the one playing my Hangout while he's talking to Geo. What a fucking twit. Audio guy. Gotta love me.
Right, now what he actually does is Sean highlights a segment of that thing, and I can equally argue that there is nothing there, or that this proves that the sound comes through Geo's mic, and he can't prove either. So you've got three scenarios. The sound, if it exists, came through my microphone. The sound, if it exists, came through Geo's microphone, or there is no sound. No, I don't think there's any sound. But he goes through this all the way through, asserting like numerous times that the sound's coming through my mic, the sound's coming through my mic. And I can equally argue that it's coming through Geo's mic and you can't tell which. Right? That's the truth. You can't tell which. It doesn't prove my point, doesn't disprove my point. Doesn't prove Geo's point, doesn't disprove Geo's point. It's totally moot, right? But he's adamant that I'm listening to his Hangout. That was what he said right at the end. He thinks that I'm listening to his Hangout.
What a fucking twit.
Oh, well, that bit. But in the Hangouts that I've had with him the other day, now he admits that he can say with 100% certainty that it was not on one of his channels. It was not on his channel. So now what he has to do is widen the net. He has to go to other Hangouts, looking for Reds, looking for GeoStreamers, looking for Soundly Hangouts, and he's never going to find it because it doesn't exist. So, and he realizes this. So now what Sean's got to do is make this analysis, the most important piece of the evidence. Make this the key that proves what went on. And it doesn't. It doesn't prove what went on. All it proves is that there was background noise. And he asserts that it was coming through my microphone. But he can't prove it. But he's trying to persuade his audience that he can. And they'll bite. They'll accept it because it's come from Sean. But what he's actually doing is distracting from the real cause. And that is prove that the Hangout that you claimed that I was listening to exists. Because if you can't prove that, Sean, it means that GeoStreamer and Soundly were having a hangout together in the background on the sly, and that they've come to you for damage control, and you're trying to muddy the waters and try and imply that in some way it was all caused by me, and then have no evidence to prove it. So, back to the argument, Sean. Find the hangout. Stop trying to influence people with subjective interpretation based on stuff that you claim to be good at, that I don't think you are that good at, because it doesn't prove whose microphone gate was picking it up. I can equally argue that it went through Geo's Hangout, equally as much as you can argue that it went through mine. Doesn't prove anything. It's moot. So let's go back to the missing evidence that you require, the Unicorn Hangout. Produce that, and then I will accept completely that the sound came through my Hangout, and I was actually